First, U.S. Army Specialist Brandon Neely was a guard at Guantanamo. He arrived there just before the first prisoners in early 2002. His job at Guantanamo was to guard the prisoners. He wasn't an interrogator. He wasn't involved in any intelligence collection. He was just supposed to get prisoners in and out of their cells as necessary, to escort them around the camp. Specialist Neely was not a witness. He was not a journalist writing about these things. He was not an international observer of some kind. He was a participant in what happened at Guantanamo, which is why his account of conditions there is so remarkable. You have not heard this story before. You have heard a lot of political jabbering about Guantanamo over the years, much of it prompted by the Pentagon's intensive, but ultimately failed public relations effort to try to make us think that Guantanamo was something to be proud of.
The treatment of the detainees in Guantanamo Bay is proper, it's humane, it's appropriate, and it is fully consistent with international conventions.
You're welcome to go down yourself. Maybe you have, and taking a look at the conditions. I urge members of our press corps to go down to Guantanamo and see how they're treated, and to see and to look at the facts.
They're very well treated down there. They're living in the tropics. They're well fed. They've got everything they could possibly want. There isn't any other nation in the world that would treat people who were determined to kill Americans the way we're treating these people.
In the tropics. Tonight you're going to hear a very different story about Guantanamo from someone who was there. The very second prisoner to get dumped off a bus at the foot of Camp X-Ray at Guantanamo, the second prisoner to arrive there, was transferred immediately into then Private Brandon Neely's custody. What happened next is in part what led Mr. Neely to go public with his story. He has not been subpoenaed. Nobody is demanding that he give this testimony. He is doing it because of the callings of his own conscience. After serving as a guard at Guantanamo for the first 6 months of its existence as a war on terror prison camp, Brandon Neely now says that he is ashamed by some of what he did there, and he's still haunted by some things that he witnessed. Moved by conscience, Mr. Neely has come forward. He came forward first to the University of California at Davis's Guantanamo Testimonials Project. He described incidents to them in quite graphic detail. You can read that testimony at our website, rachel.msnbc.com. And tonight, for the first time in any broadcast interview, he is here exclusively to describe what he witnessed and what he personally took part in. Joining us now is U.S. Army Specialist Brandon Neely. His service in the Army included guarding prisoners at the prison camp at Guantanamo Bay, beginning when the very first prisoners arrived in January 2002. Mr. Neely was honorably discharged from the Army last year. He's now president of the Houston chapter of Iraq Veterans Against the War. Brandon Neely, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Because you were at Guantanamo from the very beginning, you're one of the first people we've had the chance to ask what it was like. I was hoping that you could just describe that very first day that the prisoners arrived there, what you were told to expect, and what the scene was like when they got brought into the camp.
We were just told from the get-go, it was right after 9/11. The country was very upset about what happened. We were just told from the get-go, these were the guys who planned 9/11, that these were the worst people in the world that the world had to offer, and that we were fixing to deal with. The very first day, I was there, when they first came in. The Marines had Humvees with 50 cals escorting the bus to the Camp X-Ray at the time, and you could literally hear a pin drop when the bus started coming up. Everybody was quiet. Most people were nervous. We didn't know what to expect. I mean, I've never seen a terrorist. I didn't know what one would look like. The bus came on. You could hear the Marines yelling at them. And the next thing you know, the detainees just started coming off the bus, and we were just picking them up. We were taking control of them and taking them through the in-processing station.
Brandon, you have talked about a physical incident between you and an older prisoner on that very first day that the detainees arrived at Guantanamo. Could you describe what happened with that older man?
What happened was we took custody of the man, the detainee, we took him through the in-processing station. When he came out through the other side of the tent, me and my escort partner grabbed him, and we could tell at the time he was literally shaking. You could see his hands moving. He was very tense. He didn't want to walk, so we started screaming at him to walk. We made it over to Alpha Block, and we put him in his cage, and he was just real nervous, real tense. We put him on his knees. My partner took off his leg irons, threw the leg irons outside, and he was still shaking real bad, and he still had his goggles on. My partner went in with the key to take the handcuffs off, and he moved away. We started yelling at him, "Don't move, don't move." The interpreter was yelling at him not to move. My partner went again to take the handcuffs off, and when he did, the detainee moved real fast to the left, and I was on the left side. And just out of reaction, I had slammed him to the ground and got on top of him. And he was trying to get up, and the whole time he was trying to get up, I was just holding him down by the head. And a couple seconds later, I was pulled out of the cage by other soldiers that had came to help. They went ahead and hogtied him, which he stayed there for I really couldn't tell you how long. But the next day, we arrived to the camp. I was walking by, and I could see on the side of his face, he was all scraped up and bruised. And I later learned from another detainee the reason that he moved and he jerked away from us was when we placed him on his knees, he thought we were going to execute him.
Did you witness other incidents of detainees being beaten up or punched, any other sort of physical abuse of prisoners there?
Yeah, there was another incident. There was an incident on Charlie Block. I remember because I was working the block, and I happened to be working night shift for about a week or two, and I can't remember why. But the medic was making his rounds to give out medication, and there was a detainee that was supposed to take Ensure. A lot of them took Ensure because they were very malnutrition when they showed up. And he just plain refused, and this went on for a while. And they finally called the internal reaction force. They came in, they briefed them what was going on. So me working the block went ahead and walked over there to see what was going to happen. Well, they got there, they opened the cage, the IRF team went in, they took him down, they cuffed him, they picked him up and cuffed him to the cage. Then the medic walked in. And when the medic walked in, he looked up and he saw me. Then he kind of motioned for me to move over to my left a little bit. I didn't know what he was doing, so I went ahead and moved over. So they were holding him by the face. The medic opened up the Ensure can and started pouring it in his mouth, and he wasn't taking it. The whole Ensure, it was just running down his face. So the medic looked up, and the medic struck him one time on the side of the face, and they got out of the cage, put him back on the floor, and they left. And I turned around, and when I turned around, the first thing I noticed was that the guard tower was directly behind me. So I automatically thought over time that, well, he had positioned me in front of that guard tower, so they couldn't see what he was doing.
So it was the medic himself that punched the detainee in the face with you in the way so that it couldn't be seen from the guard tower?
Correct.
How much do you think that a lack of structure, a lack of instruction, a lack of training about how to deal with prisoners contributed to some of these incidents that you saw that you think now were quite troubling?
Well, I could think it could be a lot because nobody really knew what was going on. There was no standard operating procedure as far as how a detainee camp was supposed to be run. It was kind of like a trial and error period. If this didn't work, we'll try it this way one day. If this, just every day was something different until they thought it was right.
Why are you talking about this publicly now?
I've been to Guantanamo and I've been to Iraq, and when you return from places like that, it's just not something you just shut off overnight. It's just something that you relive every day of your life. It's nothing you'll forget. And for me, over time, it's just really built up. And every day I think about it, and I relive those situations. And it gets the best of me. And the best way for me to deal with it is to speak out. And around December, everything just really hit me, and I just knew I had to talk. I knew I needed to speak out about Guantanamo.
Do you think that more people should come forward to tell their stories? Obviously, you think that it has helped you personally. Do you think that it helps the country?
I think it does. I think people have the right to know what's going on everywhere. This helps me in an aspect to get it out, but also, you got a lot of these detainees that were innocent, has been proven innocent, and they're trying to tell their stories, and people don't believe them. I think more people do need to speak out because I think the public has the right to know what really went on. Whether their time there was positive or negative, the people have the right to know what's going on and what happened there.
Brandon Neely was a guard at the Guantanamo Bay prison camp. Brandon, thank you for coming out and telling your story publicly. Thank you for spending time telling us about it tonight. I'll mention again that you're the head of the Houston chapter of Iraq Veterans Against the War. Brandon, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Brandon Neely told his entire story.